feeling like I'm Akademiks. Can't ride no
This is a thing y'all wanted me to watch, right?
Trafficking. Although the jury did convict on 2 counts of transportation of individuals to engage in prostitution, the outcome was widely viewed as a defense victory, since the racketeering and sex trafficking counts were by far
A fraud case, federal court. He says you should go to the when I was 29.
Okay, so this is Diddy's lawyer. Okay, here we go.
here, and I know some of this, but for the benefit of my listeners, tell us a bit about your background and your upbringing. Where did you grow up?
Here we go.
Started my own firm almost 2 years ago. All of them a month long or longer. So
Legendary defense lawyer.
Here we go.
Weird to you to go from being someone who prosecuted many of these cases to defending the most famous racketeering case of all at its time?
there was a transition, but by the same token, because I knew the racketeering statute so well, I also knew how it could be abused. And I certainly tried to avoid doing that. And I think most prosecutors try to avoid doing that. But I think sometimes with high profile targets, I don't know, maybe they're not as careful as they would be otherwise. It was easier in terms of knowing the law than I thought it was going to be.
I have a theory on why they wanted to make this a racketeering case. I think when the video of Sean Combs and Cassie came out, it was a horrible video. I think that's fair to say. But it was also, I believe, at the time it came out of the statute of limitations. Whereas RICO, if you can establish that something is a racketeering enterprise, you can reach back to all of these prior acts. So why do you think they wanted to make it a racketeering case? Because, as I think we will get to, there's an argument that it didn't really fit racketeering terribly well.
I agree with you. And I think that was a fatal flaw in the case. And I think they tried to get around it. I'm going to answer your question in a minute. I think they tried to get around it by making it a racketeering conspiracy, which they felt was a little more forgiving, because that's the prevailing wisdom. The problem with a racketeering conspiracy is you need a co-conspirator. Combs can't do it alone. Combs has to do it with not just a co-conspirator on each individual racketeering act, but on the racketeering enterprise as a whole. And they didn't have Combs on that, and they didn't have a conspirator on that. And so they ended up losing the racketeering charge because they just didn't even come close to having remotely enough evidence of it. The attraction is that you get to dump all of these bad acts into one case. And the prosecutor's goal in these cases is to just kick up so much prejudice. And the idea is it's almost like making like a fish stew. If you have a really fresh fish, you're just going to give it to the customer. But if the fish is a few days old, you're going to cut it up and you're going to put it in a stew with a few onions and some tomatoes and spice, and maybe no one will actually notice that the fish isn't really that good. The same thing is true of racketeering acts. You just throw in all these crappy racketeering acts. And well, if he didn't do the arson, maybe he did the kidnapping. If he didn't do the arson or the kidnapping, maybe he did the forced labor. And it's a lot to unwind. So the defense lawyer has a lot to do because Combs was charged in terms of racketeering acts with probably 20 different events. There were 3 kidnappings. There were 4 forced labor conspiracies. Each of these forced labor had different events that were part of the charge. So you have to convince the jury that it's all nonsense, that none of it's true. So you end up trying a case that has all of these events in it. And in this particular instance, when it came to Combs, we got a jury that saw through it, that wasn't prejudiced by all of the events that the government threw in, and I think saw through it and rightly acquitted him of the racketeering conspiracy.
So let me push back on one thing. You mentioned that there were no co-conspirators or what have you, but the evidence at trial did show that there were many people who were involved in making the arrangements, I guess you could say, or the logistics or what have you for the so-called freak-offs or what have you. There were a lot of people in his orbit, former assistants, etc. So why cannot the Combs enterprise qualify as a racketeering conspiracy?
So to satisfy the racketeering statute or the conspiracy statute, the co-conspirators would have to knowingly be involved in the charged racketeering activity. So in other words, at the end of the day, there's no evidence that this was sex trafficking. And so the personal assistants, the other people who worked for Mr. Combs, thought this is Mr. Combs and his girlfriend. If they are together or if they have a swingers lifestyle, what business is it of mine? This is what he does. It seems legal. There's no indication it's not. There's sort of a strong sort of puritanical like thread, I think, that ran through the government's case. Like, well, there's sort of a strong sort of puritanical like thread, I think, that ran through there was a possibility that there was going to be another man in that room. Well, so what? Like, what business is it of mine? And it's not a matter of business at all. The personal assistants were very good about this, saying this was his personal life, and I know it was his personal life because when he had these hotel nights, I would go home and rest. I wasn't on call because it wasn't part of his business. And I think that's the way they viewed it. I think that's the way the jury viewed it.
So
If you're tuning in, this is Mark Agnifilo, who did a podcast. This is Diddy's lead attorney. We're not getting back into Diddy lore. We get it. It's done. But this is the first time he's kind of talked in depth about the case and his understanding. And, he's going to give us a little bit of insight because we're kind of wondering what his team was thinking, what he was thinking. They kind of took some ballsy chance here. It kind of worked out for them. Obviously not all the way because he was convicted of the 2-man acts, but those are pretty much, usually under 5 years, right? And is way better than life in prison. So it looks like his lawyers did a pretty good job. And here's the thing too, when it comes to his legal team, Mark Agnifilo was the first lawyer on the case, and he was the person who did the closing. And he was a lead attorney with Brian Steele and the other 8 attorneys underneath him, or other 7 attorneys underneath Brian Steele and not Brian Steele, but Mark Agnifilo. So it's the first time he's speaking, so we kind of get to hear like his strategy and how they were thinking about it. And also, obviously we've heard from Lauren Conlin, we've heard from Sean G, we've heard from so many people that's been in court, but we haven't heard from the lawyers, right? They didn't give a statement, they didn't do a press conference, they've only spoke to try to get Diddy out of jail, but they're still celebrating this as a victory.
A sizable team of amazing defense lawyers, including one of my former guests, Alexandra Shapiro. But it's notable that a lot of these lawyers came from different firms. They're not all with...
If the audio's cut in and out, people, especially my audio, please just refresh the stream. I'm looking at on my end, it should be fine. So if the audio is fucking up, just refresh the stream, please.
You and Zach and Tenny. How did that team come together? Did you put it together? Did Sean Combs put it together? How did you all coalesce?
It was a combination of me and Sean. I brought in Alexander's firm, and I brought in Cher Tremonti and Anna Estevao. And I really had a vision for the defense that it was going to be women-led and young women-led.
Okay.
I thought that was important. And we were lucky enough to have great young women lawyers. My partner, Tenny, early 30s, has been through the wars, was with me for Ranieri, was with me with Roger, was with me for all these huge trials. In my view, she had a breakout trial. She gave a stirring, wonderful opening. Anna Estevao crossed Cassie. Now, I had written the whole cross of Cassie. I wrote the whole thing. I had it ready to go. And one day I'm in my office until about 2 a.m. and I decide to walk home, which is about an hour and a half walk. And I'm looking for the streets of New York to like help me with the trial, right? And I realize I can't do the cross of Cassie. It's the wrong thing. Because let's say I box her in, I outflank her, I use my 35 years of cross-examination experience to trip her up or make her look less credible. I lose ground even from that. And I started to realize I need a young woman. I've never necessarily been one to believe that a certain type of person should cross-examine a certain type of person. I think juries see through that stuff. So the only way it was going to work in this case is the defense had to be authentically and thoroughly woman-led. Like it can't be a token, it can't be a gesture. It has to be authentic and it has to be a real commitment. And it's a commitment that I realized we had to make and that we should make.
Oh, wow. Shit, I'm gaining more respect for him as I'm listening to this. I thought basically Diddy was like, yo, bro, I want her to do this, her to do this, her to do this. He's basically saying, even though he's the main lawyer for Diddy, it became to a point where, in sexual cases, they're going to think, especially a bulldog, a bulldozer type of lawyer, bro, you're just a guy. Like, yeah, you're thinking how a guy thinks. You don't understand victims. You don't understand women. And you're hearing Mark Agnifilo say, I realize that even though I'm the lead, I'm going to have to surround this case with women, young women attorneys who could do a lot of heavy lifting. We can't just have a token woman go talk to Cassie and then all the men talk to everybody else. You need the women. And by the way, Nicole Westmoreland, hey, listen, I would love for you to come sit with me or, let's do something on Zoom or something like that. I would love to talk to you. I think you're a star. You are an absolute star. Hope your rates go up. I love you. I love what you did. As a black woman in that case, the only black woman who was the attorney there, you were the hidden gem. And I think you did an amazing job. Tenny Garagos, she did an amazing job. Anna Stevio, right? Who did a fucking amazing job as well, because I think did she do Cassie? Anyway, I'm really excited to hear like the behind the scenes of how this worked. Agnifilo basically said, I made these decisions to say, nah, let her go do it. Remember, Diddy trusts you. Diddy trusts you. So you allowing other people to do certain things, if these people fuck it up or fumble it, and you hear him say, I wrote the entire Cassie cross. So he wrote it. So like he probably wrote all the questions that she has a notepad or something like that, but she's allowed to riff and do what she needs to do. And shit, that's kind of dope. Wow.
And I was lucky because we had these outstanding young women lawyers. So Tenny did the opening and did just an epic opening. It set the stage for the whole rest of the trial. Anna did a great, patient,
Cassie, I think,
thoughtful, non-aggressive, but effective cross of Cassie.
Ooh, yes.
Tenny did the same thing with the woman we call Jane. And
Daphne.
So the women had the big...
Nicole Westmoreland annihilated Dawn Richard.
Biggest crosses in the case and the opening. And it was a genuine thing. If the jury would have seen it as something other than that, it wouldn't have worked. But it was real. It came from kind of the heart of the defense. This is what it is. And so that was certainly a decision that I made. And there was some controversy around it. This was Tenny's first opening statement in any case.
Really?
So her first opening in her career is the Sean Combs trial. And she kills it. She knocks it out of...
Her first opening statement is in the biggest case where Diddy knows his life is on the line. Wow.
The park. To this day, the press is talking about the opening. And I don't know that I've ever seen a trial where 2 weeks after the verdicts, they're still talking about the opening. And it's because the opening really set the stage. It put everything in motion in this very measured, kind of just a measured way that, in a sense, only I think a young woman who really knows the facts, and no one knew the facts like Tenny, could do. And she was perfect that way. And Anna was the perfect person to cross Cassie. So the defense started to take shape in these different ways. And ultimately, I had to get buy-in from Sean, and he did. And one of the things Sean said to Tenny right before her opening, and I'll never forget it, he says, this is my life, but this is your moment. And my life.
This is my life. This is your moment. Wow. If the stakes couldn't be motherfucking higher, you're telling someone my life is hanging in the balance, but this is the moment that you become a fucking star. God damn.
Will be best served if you rise to your moment. And Tenny went out there and rose to her moment.
You did mention that you wanted young women lawyers to play this very central role in the case. Were you perhaps responding to some extent to the prosecution's staffing of this case? Because I believe that all of the half dozen or so AUSAs on this case were women.
Hey, by the way, King DJ Tricks, thank you for the hosting for the 20 viewers on Kick. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. Was I? Maybe on some level I was, but I don't think it was that much of a counterpunch. I think it was our authentic strategy. And there's certain things that I've learned in 35 years, and I feel like I'm pretty light on my feet. I can I know trial feel, but sometimes there's a type of sincerity and genuineness that comes from
Chat, we're not only covering this. Like I have a whole bunch of topics. We were gambling on Kick before, so someone suggested this, and shit, I'm kind of like hooked a little bit. So let me listen to like a little bit more of this, and then we got a bunch of other topics just to give you a preview. Bunch of stuff I didn't get to yesterday, so I do want to get to today. Remind me, I want to get to the Carucci and Deion Sanders thing. I didn't know what was going on there. I want to get to reacting to my man What's the Dirt Iceman episode breakdown. 6ix9ine, Mellow Bucks, Kodak, YB, Ra Ali versus Cardi B. I have some stuff about a Big X the Plug, Tyler the Creator, some more stuff about Cassie lawsuit. I was gonna do it after this, but it involves another video, and I know when I start stream, you guys don't want me to just play a bunch of videos, so I might just, whatever. We're gonna get to OT Avani, which I should have done yesterday, and then we were gonna get to Drake making a statement. I believe he's in Amsterdam, so we'll get to all those things. All right, so we do have pretty much a good amount of topics that we could rock out for a couple hours with. If you guys and remember, this stream is only as good as what you guys bring to it. So whether it's a donation or whatever, however you could get me and a topic that you think is important that I haven't mentioned, and you're like, you need to talk about this shit, please just do it. All right. So I'm just getting this insight from Mark Agnifilo. Usually I see these things before and watch it off stream. I'm kind of like this. I feel like I'm doing homework on stream right now, but you guys can do it with me.
Someone who hasn't.
Oh, Meek tweets. Thank you. I got to put that towards the end of the stream, bro. Meek tweets.
Done it as many times as I have. And that's really how it came across. Like the cross-examination of Cassie, I thought was fascinating because Anna was just genuine and authentic the whole way. She wasn't trying to catch her. I don't think we pointed out an inconsistent statement or said that she was lying about anything. Not one time. It was all, but then you sent this text message, right? And you sent this text.
That's, I was listening to Vlad's interview today on The Breakfast Club. I consume content all day. So, and there was a part where they were arguing with Vlad. They're like, yo, did Cassie have immunity? Now, it was never mentioned in court that she had immunity, but I think that was particular. The way that they cross-examined Cassie, they never wanted to seem like they were attacking her. Not for her sexual proclivity. They didn't want to call her a whore. They didn't want to call her a slut. They didn't want to call her a liar. And even though now I feel some people are starting to think this, they didn't want to call her a manipulator of the situation. They understood she's pregnant. She's being seen as a victim and she's a woman. Do not antagonize. Don't try to corner her and don't try to make her seem like the bad guy. So, for example, we've seen with a lot of other people, hey, when it came to, some of the assistants or whoever else, it was asked, hey, were you given immunity? Like, why are you here? Oh, I was subpoenaed. Were you given immunity? Yes, I was. This was to make the jury aware that these people had they had some impetus to say what the state, or not the state, but the U.S. government wanted them to say. When it came to Cassie, they didn't point that out at all because that was a very thin line that it could be seen like they're trying to make the quote-unquote victim, Cassie, look like she's the bad guy. So they stayed away from that a lot. And I'm not going to lie, I think that was a really good strategy because in trying to derail or decode or, completely, sum up or violate her, like get the one up on her in her testimony, you couldn't attack Cassie. She's pregnant. She's crying. She claims she's the victim. The government claims she's the victim. She's a woman. Diddy is seen as this rich oligarch who you got to treat her carefully. So they never, ever called her a liar. They brought up some things and be like, maybe you misremembered, but they never cornered her. Now, Dawn Richard, they cornered. They never cornered Cassie.
Message, that's how you felt at the time, right? Yeah, that's how I felt. And we were so good at really mastering the written communications. We realized that
King Buck, thank you for the gifted membership, my boy.
That if we could do that, and if we could master the written communications at least as well as the government lawyers did, that's our best chance for success. Because they had this relationship in real time. And our view was that Cassie and Jane, to a certain extent, were looking back at a relationship in hindsight with maybe some measure of regret or not. But this is a relationship that happened in real time.
Red, thank you for the gifted.
And if you can make that relationship real for the jury, that's what you have to do.
You mentioned you weren't really trying to have a gotcha kind of cross-examination with Cassie. But another one of the very talented lawyers on your team, Nicole Westmoreland, did elicit what Judge Subramanian called a, quote, real Perry Mason moment, close quote, in one of the crosses she did.
Nicole is awesome. Nicole is a great lawyer, a great person, and a great cross-examiner. And we put Nicole with witnesses who we think were not going to be as honest as some of the other witnesses. And Nicole just went and took care of business. Nicole is just a very skilled cross-examiner. And so we needed that as well. I never was of the view that Cassie was going to get up there and lie. I think that she was going to have a different view of her relationship now than when she was living it.
Wow, interesting. So they never thought Cassie was going to come up there and lie. They just thought that Cassie was just going to recount the relationship with Sean very differently now than maybe how Sean recounts it. Interesting.
And whether that's lying, I guess, is up for debate, but she wasn't going to get there and lie. And so we didn't need to do that to her. And we didn't look to do that to her. Some of the witnesses, I think, were getting up there to lie. And that's where Nicole came in. And Nicole handled it and handled it very effectively.
So to zoom up a little bit higher, did you have an overarching defense theme? And I know, of course, we saw some of these themes in both Tenny's opening and your closing, but if you could have a pithy summary of how you were thinking about the case, how would you describe it?
This was all his personal life, and these were all his girlfriends. The heart of the case was his personal life. The government didn't find that he did anything wrong in his businesses. They didn't find there's anything wrong with the loans that he got or with the hundreds of millions of dollars that passed through his businesses. And had they found something wrong with that, that would have been in the indictment. And so they charged into his bedroom and into his private hotel rooms uninvited, because these are not women who went to the police. These are women who either did nothing or went to civil lawyers because after the fact they wanted a certain sum of money. And so that was the real theme, that this was his personal life. It was nobody's business. And the government was making this into something that it was not. And so everything in the case was around that. Now, we also had to admit, we admitted it right up front, that there was domestic violence. And there was domestic violence with Cassie a number of times through the years. I realized early on, we have to fully take account of that. The word I use, we have to own that. We have to take all the dispute out of that. The government's not going to have to prove that these things happened. We'll admit it in the opening. And we won't give a hard time to the witnesses who truthfully testify about these things. So that was another part of it, because I thought what the government was going to try to do was to say, if you have this violence in the past, it's a short walk from that to the force or coercion required for sex trafficking. So we had to separate the two, and we had to own one because one was committed, and we had to fight the sex trafficking because we firmly believe, and the jury firmly believed, that was not committed. So that's the reason we did that.
Okay, look like it's a break.
Like, we had to go further than that.
Give me like 3 or 4 more minutes and then we'll move on. All right, chat?
We had to sort of radically accept it and almost take it away from the government. You don't need to do anything with this. We've got this. Don't waste the jury's time. Here's another time that he hit Cassie. Here's another. Unless you're going to link it to forced sex. And that's how it played out at the trial, in my view. I think the jury's like, okay, we understand all this. Are you going to link this to sex or not? Because if you're not going to link it to sex, it might not be all that relevant. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is because we took all that on.
And people should note that he was acquitted not only of the racketeering, he was also acquitted of the sex trafficking. But let me ask you this about him as a client. Many times successful people, wealthy people, people in roles of leadership, when they come to a trial, they kind of think, well, I'm a smart person. I have good judgment. Let me sort of run this case. But it seems that he was content to let his lawyers be lawyers rather than try to be a backseat lawyer himself.
Yes, that's very true. He would say many, many times, I'm just going to get out of my own way. And that was the phrase, I'm going to get out of my own way. And he put a lot of trust in me, and I really appreciated it. And he would say that. He said, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you on this. And I would say, you should, because I know how to do this. So you have to trust me.
Were there any major...
Oh, SummerSlam is in Rutherford today? Oh, I should have went. Holy. Oh, I didn't know it was in Rutherford. Actually, low-key, I was supposed to be in Toronto, so whatever.
things in the defense that you changed because of input from your client?
Him testifying is always a big one.
I feel that during our time back in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the conventional wisdom for defense lawyers was never put your client on the stand. But I feel in the past few years that's been changing. And despite whatever jury instructions people get about the Fifth Amendment, I feel that juries today sort of expect to hear from defendants. So how much thought did you and or your client give to putting Sean Combs on the stand?
We gave it a lot of thought. And we gave it a lot of thought deep into the trial. And it really wasn't until the government put on a former CFO, and the CFO was a great witness for us and gave us a lot of great background about Sean, about the companies, and about racial diversity back when nobody was doing that. And so you look at all the issues that you would want your client to testify to, and you ask yourself, well, do we already have those? And by the end of the government's case, we had already had a lot of them. Now, we knew on some level that, it's Sean Combs. The jury is going to want to hear from Sean Combs. But I think the jury also understood that they can't hold it against him, A. And B, my sense of the jury by the end of the government's case is they got this look to them like, we understand the issues. We got it. I'm not telling you what we're going to do with it, but we got it. We understand this case. So let's get on with it. It's almost 4th of July. The judge said we're going to be out of here by the 4th of July. Let's get on with it. So I don't get the sense that they were sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for Combs to testify. It would have been a fascinating thing had he, but we got everything we needed out of the government's case, so there was really no reason to.
And so I'm guessing then that you felt pretty confident in your decision to put on a defense case that lasted under an hour, even though the prosecution had been up there for, 6 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, we did. It's because we got great stuff out of the personal assistants. We felt that we had neutralized the witnesses that hurt us. And we realized there wasn't really that much more for us to add. The government called 4 personal assistants. I thought they were all very valuable to us. I thought that the 2 escorts that the government called were very valuable to us in terms of the sex trafficking. And so we just didn't need to call any more escorts or any more employees on our own.
Going ahead to your closing statement, it was at times funny and folksy and sarcastic, and it was controversial. Some people hailed it as masterful. Others found it offensive, especially your reference to the Combs-Cassie relationship as a great love story, which featured violence, as we know. Do you have any regrets about that closing or anything you would take back or something you said in the moment where you think, well, if I were to do it all over again, I wouldn't have done it that way?
I think my reference to Jaws and needing a larger roll of crime scene tape was probably not necessary. Other than that, no, really no. So let me tell you a little bit about the closing. So the night before the closing, I had nothing written, 0.
He was sarcastic in the closing, basically saying, yeah, y'all got him. This was his closing. Y'all got him. Y'all got Diddy. Y'all have finally taken all the baby oil off the streets, all the Astroglides. Y'all will stop prostitution, and basically was making fun of the U.S. attorneys basically saying that Diddy is a racketeer and a sex trafficker. And it was just like, all y'all have proved is that this guy's a freak. So cool. All right. If y'all think that this racketeer guy that deserves a life imprisonment, he deserves life imprisonment just because y'all have taken the baby oil off the street. And apparently the jury and a lot of people were chuckling. And apparently he got like a standing ovation, or not standing ovation, but he got applause after it was done.
I had written an outline, I had written some stuff, and I read it over, and it wasn't good enough. It was not what you would need for the closing in the Sean Combs trial of the century. It just didn't rise to that level. So this is 7 p.m. I'm summing up in 14 hours. And I literally do not have a note. And my wife says to me, let's go for a walk. Let's take a little walk. And I'm walking and I'm talking to myself. And I realize I know what I want to say. And so I wrote down 3 pages of bullet points on a legal pad, in pen. And those were my notes. And what I felt the jury lacked was a story. Like, what is the story of this case? We don't need a PowerPoint. We don't need to see the emails for the 15th time. We don't need to see the video again, unless you're going to point something out that we haven't noticed. But we want to know the story of this case. Tell us a story. And the way you tell a story is you look at the people you're telling the story to. And so I set it up so that I wouldn't have to be stuck at a podium. And I got close to the jurors and I told them the story of this case. And I used a little bit of a tester to see where they wanted to go. And it was toward the beginning. And I say, the Homeland Security used all this equipment and they knocked down all the fences and they used a special response team and they destroyed all of his property. But it's worth it because they got the Astroglide. And they all started laughing. The whole jury started laughing. And I realized they want this. They don't want me to be up there and state and you shouldn't believe this witness. They wanted the story. And one of the things that people don't realize about trials, and it's the most important part of the trial, is you have this shared experience with the jury. You've all gone through the trial together. So it's not just you talking about the evidence. It's all of you. We had 17 jurors because we had 5 alternates at the time. So the 17 jurors and you have gone through this last 2 months of just craziness. And it's a shared experience that's never been discussed. So if you can do that, all of a sudden, you're like them. You're not other. You're not the lawyer and they're the jury. You have this shared experience that you're all now commenting on. And so there are things that happen during the trial that are funny. There are things that happen during the trial that are emotional. And the way you kind of bond with the jury is you talk about those things in that way. Like, you don't talk at them. I'm going to tell you a story of something we all just saw. It's almost like we went on this 2-month backpacking trip, and now I'm going to tell you a story about all
right, let me skip a little bit more, and then we're going to move on.
Is be with them. My thing is, I am feeling where you are, and I am going to tell the story that we all just saw together. This is our story. And almost keep the government that people are not part of our story. Here's our story. Here's the funny things in our story. Here's the poignant things in our story. And once you do that, you win. It's really that simple. If they go with you, if they don't go with you because they're saying, well, wait a minute, your client definitely robbed that bank, then you lose anyway. But if you feel that from them, you're going to win. And so I knew that the jury got it. I didn't know what the verdict would be, but I knew the jury got it. And I knew that I was kind of building as I went and that the summation was going the way I wanted.
So then tell me, how were you feeling as the jury left to deliberate, and how were you feeling during the deliberations? Because they sent out a couple of notes, and I understand that one of the notes might have thrown you and your colleagues on the defense team for a loop, perhaps.
So I think what you're talking about, they came back the second day and said they had verdicts on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, but not on count 1. And no one knew what to make of that. Is it bad? Is it good? And I read the press on it. I made the mistake of reading the press on it. We looked ashen, we looked shaken, all these things, none of which are all that off. But we didn't know what to think. So the day ends. I go home at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up, which is standard. I wake up between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. every day I'm on trial.
Wow.
Which is not nearly enough sleep for me. And I have this thought, and I sent Tenny Garagos a text, and I said, the verdict is going to be good for us. We have to figure out where's the airplane, where's his passport. We're going to make a bail application because they probably convicted him of the prostitution.
Ooh, wow.
And they probably acquitted him of the sex trafficking, which is why they can't reach a decision on the racketeering. Because if they had convicted him of the sex trafficking, they would have convicted him of the RICO, because now he's a sex trafficker. They're not going to do him some favor on the RICO. And had they acquitted him of the prostitution, they would have acquitted him of the RICO. But they can't reach a decision on the RICO, which means they split. it hit me with such clarity, like it had to be that. And then, of course, it was. And I also had the feeling that if they couldn't reach a decision on the RICO that second day and they reached decisions on the others, there might be just a couple of holdouts against us and they'll see fit to acquit them of the RICO. And then I think a half an hour into the third day of deliberation, they did exactly that. So I needed the dust to settle. And then I think I figured out what was going on.
So, as you mentioned, the jury came back and they did convict on 2 interstate transport prostitution related counts, but they acquitted on the racketeering. They acquitted on the sex trafficking. I think the general consensus about the verdict was, in the words of our former colleague Mitch Epner, that this was a major victory for the defense, a major loss for the prosecution. Combs was acquitted on the most serious counts, the counts that could have exposed him to a life sentence. But let me ask you this. In your post-verdict statement, you praised the jury as wonderful, and you said they got the situation right, or right enough. And the right enough part, I'm guessing, alluded to the fact that they did convict your client on these 2 prostitution-related counts. But speaking very candidly, I think you did have an uphill climb on those in terms of just the text of the statute and the facts, and there were these escorts who were transported, etc. You're not going to appeal those convictions, are you?
I think we are. And I'll tell you why. Because Combs has to intend this interstate travels for purpose of prostitution. And why would he think it's prostitution when Cowboys for Angels is alive and well? We can have a cowboy at our house in an hour. It's an ongoing business doing very well, operating in dozens and dozens of locations, more locations every day. How is he supposed to know that's illegal when it's a thriving business? How is he supposed to know it's illegal to make your own pornography when you could go on YouTube, wherever you porn, whatever I say. So I have to pretend that I don't know these sites. What I've
BaddyHub.com
heard. And there's entire categories of homemade porn.
True.
If someone traveled from one state to another to do that, why isn't that a violation of the Mann Act? If they were paid something or their travel was paid or there was some compensation, why would he think that making homemade porn is illegal or that using cowboys from Cowboys for Angels is illegal? And he was
no, chat. I think this is like really good info.
Convicted of that. And I think the jury must have reached a conclusion. It was just too much of it. There were too many cowboys and too many porn stars for us to acquit you of this. But if you look at the trial evidence on the record, the government called 2 of these men. They both said very clearly, I am not a prostitute. They both very clearly said, I do not have sex for money. So if we're looking at the trial evidence, I don't know where the trial evidence shows prostitution. I think that there's this innate notion, well, it must be, right? But that's not what the trial evidence showed. So we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see what the sentence is. We'll have to see a lot of things. But he is considering appealing.
Your client is acquitted on these major charges, but on the same day, you moved for his release on bail post-verdict, and Judge Subramanian did deny it. What did that feel like for either you or your client? Was there a kind of whiplash or a bittersweet thing going on? Because on the one hand, you achieved what was widely regarded as a big win, but on the other hand, at the end of the day, at the end of the trial, your client is going back to MDC?
So what Sean said, and it's as good a way to put it as any, is like, we just won the championship and they stole our trophy. And that's kind of what it felt like. We won the championship and now I'm ready to hoist up the Stanley Cup and someone drives away with the Stanley Cup and I never get to touch it. But on a more substantive note, it's a tricky situation because, as the court rightly observed, the entirety of the Mann Act is a violent crime. But why would being a John be a violent crime? If it's a violent crime, you have to show exceptional circumstances. And I think we are going to go back to the court with a bail application probably in the next several days and try to argue that what's the exceptional circumstance is that a John is being prosecuted under the Mann Act. And the purpose of the Mann Act was to prosecute people who make money from the business of really to be held out as how society feels about anything. And I think the same is true here. I think.
All right. Okay. All right. All right, people. All right. Yeah. So